Hello, Forecaster here, and we are back in Minecraft 1.7.10 for a quick video about Pneumaticcraft and programming with the remote. Now, this is using Pneumaticcraft version 1.12.3, build 146. Not sure if that matters, but it might, so just telling you about that. Now, the remote in Pneumaticraft, this thing, when you right click with it, you get a blank interface. And the reason that it's blank, of course, is that you need to fill it out with elements yourself. So if we shift right click with it, we get the editor, and we can see that we have 4 elements at our disposal. We have the checkbox, the label, the button, and the drop down. I'm sure you know how checkboxes, buttons, and drop downs work. I'm going to go over all of them, of course. Now, if we press tab, or your inventory key, I have it on tab, to exit the editor, and then we right click with the remote again, we now have these elements in the remote interface. But they don't do anything on their own. So if we exit that and go back into the editor, we can right click each of these to get some options for each of them. Let's start with the checkbox. We go in here. We can change the label for the checkbox. So we can choose what the text next to it says. So I can change that. Tooltip is text that is shown when you hover over it, like this, of course. And then we can set a variable name that this checkbox will modify. So I have a bunch of variables I've tested with for other things, but let's make a new variable. We'll call it my checkbox variable, like that. And I'm going to copy that. Now in the chat, there is a command called get global variable. And you can provide that with an argument that is a variable name. So we can get our variable, and we can see that it is 0, 0, 0. All Pneumaticraft variables have an X, Y, and Z value, or they can have an item. We're going to, as far as the remote is concerned, it only interacts with the X, Y, and Z values. But we can use this command to see what the variable is. There's also a set global variable command you can use to set a variable to whatever value you want. But since we have set the checkbox to use that variable, if we check it and then do get global variable again, you can see that it has set X to 1. That's what the checkbox does. If we uncheck it, it will set X back to 0. Now, if we want to use that, let's get this drone here. And I also need a programmer. Let's put that down. We'll put the drone in. I am going to go into creative mode. So we're going to put a start piece. Then we are going to get a condition coordinate here. And the condition coordinate allows you to test coordinate values to see what they are. So if we go in here, we can set x equals, so x1 equals x2. We have two slots on the condition piece. This is 1 and this is 2. Then we need two coordinate pieces. You put one there and one there. And it will now compare these two. So this one we're going to set to a variable name. We're going to specify the global character, which tells it that it should look for a global variable instead of a variable that only exists within the drone. So we're going to set that to our my checkbox variable. So this is just going to get the values x, y, and z from this global variable. And then we want to compare it with this piece here. We're going to have this on constant, and then we can either test if x is 0 or 1. We can set it to 1. Now we have the condition set up. We can do something with that. So we're going to take two text pieces. Left is false and right is true. So we'll set this, say false. The text here is arbitrary. Just using true and false for clarity. Then we need the jump. No, that's the wrong one. I need the label piece. And then we're going to set a true and a false. So now we have two paths. Then we are simply going to take a, let's see, I want a go to location piece. Two of those. Now let's get the GPS tool. Where is it? There it is. This. And we're also going to get a piece of green wool and a piece of red wool. So we're going to set 2 points, basically. One here and one here. Now, the green one is going to be our true position. So let's select a location just above that. And we have these coordinates here. We're going to go into here, and we're going to get an area piece. One for that, and one for that. Now, on our true side, we are going to set point 1 to be this GPS tool. So we set that position. So now we have set the position, which is the green wool, or just above the green wool. We're going to do the same for the false position. So select that. Whoops. I don't think that worked. Okay. I can't click anywhere. It deselects that. If you click an empty slot, apparently. So let's just press escape. And now that is set as well. So now, if it's true, if this condition is true, it's going to go to the green wool. If this condition is false, it's going to go to the red wool. And the condition is dependent on whether the checkbox is checked or not. So let's import the program into the drone. We'll take the drone and we'll place it. So currently the checkbox is unchecked. So it's going to stay at the red wool. If I check it, it goes to the green wool. If I uncheck it, it goes back to the red wool. And that's pretty much it. So we have a condition that checks a value controlled by this checkbox, and we can manipulate the drone with the remote. So let's move on. The label is pretty simple. it just displays text, right? Well, it's actually a little more advanced than that, or it can be. You can use it to just display a static text. Also, all of the elements have this, which is you can specify a variable, and we can actually test that right now. So if we use our my checkbox variable here, we can set this to only be visible when this variable has a specific value. So for example, if we set this to 1, the label will only be visible when the checkbox is checked, because it sets this variable's x to 1. So if we exit out of that and that, currently the checkbox is not checked. We check it, the label appears, and the robot goes to the green wool, of course. So we can control other elements through variables. And you can also, of course, set global variables in the drone, so you can display information here. Now, another thing we can do with the label is if we write a $, then a start squirrely brace, then a variable name, then an end squirrely brace, or squiggly brace. We're going to remove this. Reset that. The label is now going to replace that with the x, y, and z of that variable. So if we exit out, go into here, we can see the status of the checkbox in the label. Now, if you want, since we don't, in the case of the checkbox, we don't care about the y and z values. So we can specify that we only want the x value to be displayed. Like that. Fancy. The button is pretty simple. It basically works the same as the checkbox, sort of. What we can do is we can specify a variable, and variables in the remote are always global, which is why this symbol is always here. You can't, it's not optional. But unlike the checkbox, which toggles this value, we can specify all of them. And when you click the button, it will simply set the variable, or yeah, the variable to this specific value, or set these specific values. So if we set 1, 2, and 3, and call that button 1, you'll notice it also has the enabling variable. You can also set the width and height of the button, which can be useful, of course. So we have button 1, and then we're also going to make button 2. Put it there nicely, call it button 2. We're going to set the same variable, and then 3, 2, 1. And then we're going to change this label to display all 3 values. Now if I go into the remote and push button 1, it's going to set the variable to 1, 2, 3. If I click button 2, it sets it to 3, 2, 1. You'll notice that this also affects the drone. It doesn't affect the checkbox, however. If we manipulate this, it's going to set it back to 0, 0, 0 or 1, 0, 0. So, pretty straightforward so far, right? The button allows you to specify the value set, and it doesn't toggle it. It always sets it. So if you keep clicking the button, it's not going to reset it to anything. You have to have 2 buttons to toggle between multiple values. The drop down, finally, if we right click this, we get the drop-down elements, so we can have a set of values. So if we take this, we can say, for example, you have the choice of 1, 3, or 5. And we separate them with commas, not semicolons. Whoops. Like that. So now, with this, we can select one of these values. And you'll notice that it doesn't set the variable to the value I typed, the number I typed in the choice field. It sets it to the position of that element, or of that option. So we have 0, 1, and 2. We then have to know what the options we have in the remote are and test for the position. So, for example, if I can also use text here. So, none, everything, and one thing. I can use text for the options. And apparently it sorts them alphabetically, which is a little weird. I don't think I've ever used the checkbox, so I didn't know that. That's kind of annoying, actually. It shouldn't do that. But I suppose it doesn't really matter for the user, but as the programmer, this is kind of annoying because the options are in the wrong order. Because you can see that it keeps the position I type them in. So none was first, so it should be on the top. Then we have everything, which is position 1, and one thing, which is the last position 2. But as you can see, if I have it on 1, the drone goes to green because its X is 1. If I set it to anything else, X is not 1, so it goes to red. And that's basically the remote. You can also import and export these layouts with all the variables and settings to Pastebin or from another remote. And that's basically it. So whenever you want to use a remote, use it with a global variable, and then you have to use that global variable in whatever you want to control to get the result you want. And that's a matter of just programming it. For drone, you use the condition puzzle pieces. Same for the what's it called? The programmable controller. I don't know if there's anything else that lets you use them. But anyway, hope that was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.